The church bells had just finished their final chime when Victoria's knees buckled. One moment she was standing at the altar in her grandmother's restored lace gown, her hand trembling in Marcus Whitmore's cold grip as the minister droned through the vows. The next, the white marble floor was rushing up to meet her, and the last thing she heard before everything went black was her fiancé's irritated sigh. "Jesus Christ, Victoria, not now!" When she opened her eyes, she wasn't looking up at Marcus's perfectly chiseled face or her mother's concerned frown. Instead, she found herself staring into eyes so dark they were nearly black, set in a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. Sharp, unforgiving, beautiful in a way that made her breath catch even through the fog in her head. "Don't move." The command came in a voice like smoke and whiskey. She tried to sit up anyway, and a strong hand pressed against her shoulder, keeping her down on what she now realized was a leather sofa, in a room that definitely wasn't the church sanctuary. The walls were dark wood paneling, the furniture expensive, but masculine. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on the desk, catching the light from the window. "Where?" "The rector's private office. You went down hard enough that I thought you'd cracked your skull." The man shifted, and she caught sight of a suit that probably cost more than her car. "I'm Nathaniel Carver. I caught you before you hit the ground." Victoria's hand flew to her face, panic shooting through her chest. "My makeup—" "Smeared to hell when you collapsed." Something flickered in those dark eyes. "I cleaned it off. You were burning up, and I needed to see if you were injured." The room tilted again, and this time it had nothing to do with whatever had made her faint. Her foundation, her carefully applied concealer. The thick layer of powder she'd spent 40 minutes perfecting this morning. "You had no right—" She tried to push herself up, but her arms felt like water. "I had every right. You collapsed at your own wedding." He leaned back, and for the first time she saw the small white hand towel on the side table. It was covered in beige makeup. And something else. Something that made her stomach twist. "The better question is what he did to put those bruises on your face." Victoria's hand shot to her left cheekbone, feeling the tender swelling that no amount of foundation could fully hide. The one Marcus had left 3 nights ago when she'd suggested postponing the wedding. Just 1 more week, she'd said. Just until her father could get back from his business trip in Singapore. Just until she felt ready. He'd made sure she understood that the Whitmores didn't postpone. They didn't wait for anyone, not even dying fathers who'd never make it home in time. "I fell," she whispered, the lie automatic after 72 hours of practice. Nathaniel's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. "Sure you did. Just like you fell into a marriage with a man who looks at you like you're a business acquisition he's mildly disappointed in." She wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat because he was right. Marcus had looked at her with barely concealed impatience throughout the entire ceremony, checking his Rolex twice during the opening prayer. This wedding wasn't about love. It had never been about love. It was about the Whitmore real estate empire merging with her father's tech fortune. About Marcus securing his inheritance from his grandmother's trust, which required him to be married by 35. About her mother finally having the society wedding she'd dreamed of since Victoria was born. About everyone except Victoria herself. "I need to get back," she said, pushing herself up despite the way the room swayed. "They're waiting. The reception is going on without you." Nathaniel stood, and she realized he was tall. Well over 6 feet with shoulders that strained the fabric of his jacket. "Your mother told everyone you were overcome with emotion. Very bridal." "Very touching." The bitterness in his voice made her look up sharply. "You don't even know me. Why do you care?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then he moved to the window, gazing out at the manicured gardens where 200 guests were probably drinking champagne and eating catered hors d'oeuvres. "I knew a woman once who wore makeup like armor," he said quietly. "Covered bruises, split lips, black eyes. She smiled through charity galas and dinner parties and told everyone she was clumsy, that she bruised easily, that her husband just had a temper, but really, he loved her." Victoria's chest tightened. What happened to her? She died. He turned back to face her, and the expression on his face made her blood run cold. Her husband pushed her down a flight of stairs during an argument about whether they should have salmon or chicken at their anniversary party. Broke her neck. The silence that followed was suffocating. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered. "Don't be sorry. Be smart." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and cedar-scented. "That bruise on your face is maybe 3 days old. You're marrying him anyway. So either you're incredibly stupid, or you're trapped." Her throat closed up. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." She wanted to tell him everything. About her father's company, hemorrhaging money after a failed product launch. About Marcus's family offering to bail them out in exchange for this marriage. About her mother's brittle smile and her father's exhausted eyes, and the weight of being an only child who couldn't let her parents lose everything. Instead, she said, "It's complicated." "It always is." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. Money problems, business arrangement, family pressure?" "All of the above," she admitted, too tired to maintain the fiction. He made a sound low in his throat that might have been sympathy or disgust. "And you think marrying a man who hits you is going to solve any of that?" "He doesn't—" She stopped because the lie wouldn't come. "It was one time. He was stressed about the wedding, and I pushed him, and—" "It's never one time, Victoria." The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. "It escalates. It always escalates." "You don't know that. I know exactly that." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "I've spent the last 15 years making sure men like Marcus Whitmore face consequences for the things they do in the dark." She stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What are you talking about?" A knock at the door interrupted whatever he might have said. A woman's voice, cultured and impatient. "Victoria, sweetheart, are you in there?" Her mother. Victoria stood on shaking legs, smoothing down her wedding dress, her mind racing. The makeup was gone. There was no hiding the bruise now. No explaining it away as shadows or too much blush or a trick of the light. Nathaniel moved to the door, blocking it with his body. "You have about 10 seconds to make a decision that's going to determine the rest of your life." "What decision?" "Whether you walk back out there and marry him, or whether you walk away." She laughed, and it came out broken and slightly hysterical. "Walk away to what? My father will lose everything. My mother will never forgive me. Marcus's family will destroy us in court. Or," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice cutting through her spiral like a blade, "you let me handle the Whitmores, and you start living a life where you don't have to cover bruises with foundation." "Victoria!" Her mother knocked again, harder this time. "Open this door right now." She looked at Nathaniel, this stranger who'd caught her when she fell, who'd wiped away her carefully constructed mask and seen what she'd been hiding. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like pain. "Because nobody helped her. Nobody caught her before she fell. And I have to live with that every single day." The woman he'd mentioned. The one who died. "Your wife?" Victoria whispered. "My sister." His voice cracked on the word, just barely. She was 26. She had her whole life ahead of her. And I was so busy building my empire, making my money, that I didn't see what was happening until it was too late. Victoria's eyes burned. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be brave." He glanced at the door, where her mother was now demanding that someone find the key. "What's it going to be, Victoria? Door number 1, where you marry Marcus and spend the next however many years applying concealer? Or door number 2? "What's door number 2? A slow smile spread across his face, and it was the most dangerous thing she'd ever seen. "You trust me for the next hour, and I'll show you exactly how much power you actually have." It was insane. He was a stranger. She knew nothing about him except that he had sad eyes and strong hands, and a sister who died because nobody saved her. But when the door burst open and her mother swept in, Followed by Marcus and the minister and half a dozen concerned wedding guests, Victoria heard herself say, "I'm not going through with the wedding." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother's face went white. "Excuse me? I said I'm not marrying him." Victoria's voice was stronger now, fed by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "This wedding is off." Marcus's expression twisted into something ugly. "The hell it is. We have 200 people out there, a $50,000 reception, and legally binding contracts that say nothing about forcing her to marry you," Nathaniel interrupted smoothly. "Last I checked, we abolished arranged marriages in this country, around the same time we abolished slavery." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he really looked at Nathaniel for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" "Nathaniel Carver." The name clearly meant something, because Marcus's face went from red to pale in the space of a heartbeat. You can't be." "I assure you I am." Nathaniel's smile was all teeth. "And I'm also the man who just bought the outstanding debt on your family's commercial properties. All of them. As of about," he checked his watch, "20 minutes ago." Victoria's mother gasped. Marcus looked like he'd been struck. "That's impossible. Those loans are held by First National. They were very motivated to sell when I offered them triple the value." Nathaniel's tone was conversational, but there was steel underneath. "Which means, Marcus, that I now hold the paper on about $600 million worth of Whitmore real estate, and I'm calling those loans due, immediately." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "You can't do that." "I absolutely can. It's all spelled out in the terms you signed. Loans are callable with 90 days' notice, or immediately in cases of, how did the contract phrase it? Moral turpitude or criminal activity." Nathaniel tilted his head. "Domestic violence counts as criminal activity, doesn't it?" Marcus lunged forward, and Nathaniel didn't move an inch. "You have no proof." "I have her face." Nathaniel's voice dropped to something lethal. "And I have security footage from the parking garage of your building 3 nights ago showing you striking her in the face hard enough to knock her into a car. Your building manager was very cooperative once I explained that I was considering purchasing the property." Victoria's knees went weak again. He'd done all of this in the 20 minutes she'd been unconscious? Her mother found her voice, shrill and desperate. "Victoria, think about what you're doing. Think about your father. Is already taken care of," Nathaniel said before Victoria could respond. "I've purchased the outstanding shares of his company, injected the capital needed to stabilize it, and installed him as CEO with full operational control. He'll receive the contracts via email," he checked his watch again, "right about now." As if on cue, Victoria's mother's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Victoria stared at Nathaniel, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Why are you doing this?" His eyes met hers, and the intensity there stole her breath. "Because I can. Because nobody else will. And because watching you walk down that aisle to marry a man who put his hands on you would have destroyed something in me I'm not sure I can afford to lose." "This is insane," Marcus sputtered. "You can't just swoop in and yet, I did." Nathaniel finally looked away from Victoria, fixing Marcus with a stare that made the other man take an involuntary step backward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out to that reception and tell your guests that the wedding is off due to irreconcilable differences. You're going to apologize for the inconvenience. You're going to be gracious and dignified and accept full responsibility." "Like hell I will." "Or," Nathaniel continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken, "I'll release the security footage to every major news outlet in the city, along with detailed documentation of the 3 other women who've filed complaints against you for assault over the past 7 years. Complaints that your family's lawyers made disappear with generous settlements and non-disclosure agreements." Victoria's stomach lurched. 3 other women? Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Nathaniel pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and turned the screen toward Marcus. "That's Margaret Chen, Sarah Goldstein, and Rebecca Torres. Would you like me to read you their statements, or would you prefer to start walking toward that reception?" The fight went out of Marcus like air from a punctured tire. He looked at Victoria, and for just a moment, she saw something like genuine emotion flicker across his face. Not love, not even affection, but maybe a twisted kind of possessiveness that made her skin crawl. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "No," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I really don't think I will." He turned and walked out without another word, her mother scurrying after him with her phone pressed to her ear, already doing damage control. The minister cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'll just go see about the guests." He fled, and then it was just Victoria and Nathaniel in the suddenly quiet office. "I can't believe you just did that," she whispered. He shrugged, sliding his phone back into his pocket. "I've done worse for worse reasons. The security footage, the other women, my father's company, you couldn't have arranged all of that in 20 minutes. You're right, I couldn't have." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "I've been investigating Marcus Whitmore for the past 6 weeks. The room tilted again. "What?" "I make it my business to know about men like him. Men who think their money and their family name put them above consequences." He moved closer, and she could see flecks of gold in those dark eyes. "When I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was getting married, I did some digging, found the other women, found the pattern, started putting pieces in place. But you didn't know me. Why would you? Because he's done this before, and he'll do it again unless someone stops him." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I couldn't save my sister, but I could save you." Tears burned hot behind Victoria's eyes. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and gently touched the bruise on her cheekbone with his fingertips. The touch was feather-light, nothing like Marcus's brutal strike. "Does it hurt?" "Not as much as my pride. Pride heals." His thumb traced a whisper-soft line along her jaw. Broken bones and broken spirits take longer. She should pull away, should put distance between herself and this dangerous stranger who'd just blown up her entire life. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch like a flower toward sunlight. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" He let his hand drop, and she immediately missed the warmth of it. "Now you go out there and hold your head high. You tell anyone who asks that you made a choice to value yourself over everyone's expectations. You thank them for coming, apologize for the inconvenience, and you walk out of this church a free woman. And then you live your life. Your real life. Not the one your mother planned or Marcus demanded, or your father's business required." He stepped back, creating professional distance between them, but his eyes never left hers. "You figure out who Victoria actually is when she's not covering bruises, or playing a role, or trying to save everyone else." It sounded terrifying. It sounded like the most freedom she'd ever had. "I don't know if I can do this alone," she admitted. Something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe. Or hunger. "You don't have to." Before she could ask what he meant, he pulled a business card from his jacket and pressed it into her hand. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. Embossed lettering that read Nathaniel Carver, Private Acquisitions, and a phone number. "Call me," he said simply. "Tomorrow, next week, next month. Whenever you're ready." "Ready for what?" His smile was slow and devastating. "To stop running from what you want and start running toward it." Her breath caught. "And if I don't know what I want?" "Then I'll help you figure it out." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. "For what it's worth, Victoria, I think you're the bravest person in this building. It takes real courage to walk away from a burning building everyone else insists is perfectly safe." Then he was gone, slipping out into the hallway and disappearing like smoke. Victoria stood there for a long moment, still wearing her wedding dress, her face bare of makeup, his business card clutched in her hand like a talisman. From outside she could hear the low murmur of confused guests, and her mother's bright, brittle voice making excuses. She should be terrified. She'd just called off her wedding, humiliated her family, and accepted help from a man she'd known for less than an hour. Instead, she felt lighter than she had in months. She walked to the mirror hanging on the wall and studied her reflection. Without the makeup, the bruise stood out stark against her pale skin. Purple and yellow at the edges, already fading but still visible. Proof of what she'd almost committed herself to for the rest of her life. She touched the card in her hand, running her thumb over the embossed letters of Nathaniel's name. Tomorrow, he'd said. Or next week. Or next month. Victoria smiled at her reflection and slipped the card into the hidden pocket of her wedding dress, right over her heart. She'd call him tonight. 3 months later. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menus had no prices and the waiters spoke in hushed tones. Victoria sat at a corner table watching the door, her heart doing complicated gymnastics in her chest. She'd called Nathaniel the night of the wedding, as promised. They'd met for coffee the next day, then lunch the day after that, then dinner. For 3 months, they'd danced around each other like boxers in a ring, neither wanting to make the first move, both terrified of what might happen if they did. He'd helped her find an apartment, a gallery space for the photography business she'd always dreamed of starting. Introduced her to lawyers and accountants and people who could help her build something that was hers. And through it all, he'd been unfailingly respectful. Kept his distance. Never pushed for anything more than friendship, even though she could see the want in his eyes every time he looked at her. She was done with distance. The door opened and Nathaniel walked in, looking devastating in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her first car. His eyes found her immediately, and the smile that spread across his face made her stomach flip. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Sorry I'm late. Meeting ran long." "It's fine." She'd dressed carefully tonight. A red dress that hugged her curves, her hair down the way he'd once mentioned he liked it. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Wariness crept into his expression. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I want to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the jolt of electricity that always accompanied his touch. "You saved my life, Nathaniel. Not just from Marcus, but from myself. From a future where I would have disappeared into someone else's expectations until there was nothing left of me." His fingers tightened around hers. "You would have found your way out eventually. Maybe, but it would have taken years, and cost me pieces of myself I might never have gotten back." She held his gaze, letting him see everything she'd been carefully hiding for months. "You gave me my life back. You gave me myself back. And I've been waiting 3 months to ask you something." "What's that?" "Why haven't you kissed me yet?" The question hung between them like a held breath. Nathaniel's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, his eyes searching hers. "Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. Because I didn't want you to think that helping you came with strings attached." His voice dropped. "Because I was terrified that if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop." Heat flooded through her. "What if I don't want you to stop?" "Victoria, I'm not fragile, Nathaniel. I'm not broken. I'm not some damsel who needs to be protected from your interest." She leaned forward, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I'm a woman who knows what she wants. And I want you." Something dangerous flashed in his expression. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He stood abruptly, tossing bills on the table without looking at them, and held out his hand. "Come with me." She didn't hesitate. She took his hand and let him lead her out of the restaurant, into the cool evening air. His car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black thing that probably cost more than most houses. But he didn't open the door. Instead, he backed her up against it, caging her in with his arms, his body a wall of heat in front of her. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice rough. "I don't do casual. I don't do halfway. If we do this, if I kiss you right now, I'm all in. Completely. Irrevocably. Her heart was hammering so hard, she was sure he could hear it. What does that mean? It means I want everything. Your mornings, and your nights, and every moment in between. It means I want to wake up next to you, and fall asleep holding you, and know that you're mine, the way I'm already yours. His hand came up to cup her face, careful of the long-healed bruise. It means I'm going to be protective and possessive, and probably overbearing sometimes because the thought of anything happening to you makes me want to burn the world down. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the heat of him surrounding her, and the wild hope blooming in her chest. Say something, he murmured. I love you, she whispered. His control snapped. The kiss was everything she'd imagined for 3 months, and nothing like it at all. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. She clutched at his shoulders, his jacket, anything to keep herself grounded as the world spun around them. He tasted like whiskey, and want and promise, and when he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I love you, he said against her lips. I've loved you since I caught you before you fell. Maybe even before that, when I saw your picture in the wedding announcement, and something in me just knew. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Take me home. Your place or mine? I don't care, as long as it's with you. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Marry me. She laughed, giddy and disbelieving. We've been dating for 3 months. We've been dancing around each other for 3 months. I've known you were mine since the moment I wiped the makeup off your face and saw who you really were underneath all the armor. He traced her bottom lip with his thumb. Marry me, Victoria, not because anyone's forcing you, or because there's money involved, or because it's expected. Marry me because you love me, and I love you, and life's too short to waste time pretending we don't both know exactly where this is going. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 months ago, standing at an altar in a wedding dress, about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She thought about how Nathaniel had caught her when she fell, had wiped away her mask, had seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen to save her anyway. She thought about the life she'd been headed toward, and the life she was living now, full of photography and freedom and a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile was blinding. He kissed her again, then pulled back just enough to murmur against her lips. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. I know you will. She threaded her fingers through his hair, pulling him back down to her. Now take me home and show me exactly what all in looks like. He did. 6 months later. The church was small and intimate, nothing like the grand cathedral where Victoria had almost married Marcus. Just 50 people, close friends and family, and a minister who'd agreed to do the ceremony with 2 weeks' notice. Victoria stood in the bride's room, studying her reflection in the mirror. The dress was simple, elegant. Cream-colored silk that skimmed her body and made her feel beautiful without feeling like she was wearing a costume. Her makeup was light, natural, just enough to enhance without concealing. No armor today, no masks. A soft knock at the door, and her father poked his head in. He looked better than he had in years, the stress lines around his eyes finally starting to fade. Nathaniel's investment had saved his company, and more than that, had given him back his pride. You look beautiful, sweetheart, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thanks, Dad. She turned to face him, taking in the sight of him in his tuxedo. Are you ready? Are you? He moved closer, taking her hands in his. Because if you're not, if you have any doubts at all, we can walk right out of here. No questions asked. She smiled, thinking about how different this was from 6 months ago, when walking away hadn't seemed like an option at all. I'm sure, Dad. I've never been more sure of anything." He nodded, satisfied. "He's a good man, Victoria. Terrifying as hell when you cross him, but good. And he loves you like I've never seen anyone love anyone." "I know." And she did. Nathaniel showed her every day in 1,000 small ways. The way he made sure she ate breakfast, even when she was rushing for a photography shoot. The way he listened to her talk about lighting and composition like it was the most important thing in the world. The way he touched her like she was precious, like she was his, like he still couldn't quite believe she'd chosen him back. "Then let's get you married." Her father offered his arm, and she took it. The ceremony was perfect. Simple and honest and full of joy instead of obligation. When Victoria walked down the aisle, Nathaniel's face transformed, wonder and love and possession all mixed together in an expression that made her breath catch. The vows were traditional until Nathaniel went off script. "I promise to catch you when you fall," he said, his voice carrying through the small church. "To see you when you're hiding. To love you in your armor and out of it. To build a life with you that's ours and nobody else's." His thumb traced over her knuckles. "I promise to protect you, cherish you, and spend every day proving that choosing me was the best decision you ever made." Victoria's eyes were swimming with tears. "I promise to let you catch me," she said. "To trust you with all the parts of myself, even the scared ones. To build this life with you and choose you every single day." She smiled through the tears. "And I promise that walking away from that church 6 months ago was the second best decision I ever made. The best one is saying yes to you right now." When the minister pronounced them married and Nathaniel kissed her, the applause was deafening. The reception was held at Nathaniel's house, a sprawling estate with gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Victoria had spent the past 3 months slowly moving her things in, but it still felt surreal that this was her home now, her life. She was standing on the terrace, looking out at the gardens and catching her breath when Nathaniel found her. He slipped his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. Deliriously. She covered his hands with hers, lacing their fingers together. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for saving me, for loving me even when I was too scared to love myself." He turned her in his arms, cupping her face with both hands. "You saved yourself, Victoria. I just gave you the push you needed." He kissed her softly, sweetly. "And loving you has never been a choice. It's as involuntary as breathing." She pulled him down for another kiss, longer this time, full of promise and heat and the future stretching out before them. When they finally pulled apart, she saw her mother watching from the doorway. They'd reconciled slowly over the past few months, her mother gradually accepting that Victoria's happiness mattered more than social status or business arrangements. "Your mother's glaring at me," Nathaniel observed. "She's not glaring, she's assessing." Victoria laughed. "She's decided you're acceptable." High praise from Diane Ashford. The highest. She sobered slightly. "Have you heard anything about Marcus?" Nathaniel's expression darkened. "He's facing charges. 2 of the other women came forward after the engagement announcement. Between their testimonies and the security footage, the DA thinks they have a solid case." "Good." Victoria was surprised by how little satisfaction she felt at the news. Marcus Whitmore was just a man, in the end. A damaged, dangerous man who'd hurt people because he could, because nobody had ever made him face consequences before. But he wasn't her problem anymore. "I don't want to think about him today," she said firmly. Nathaniel's smile was slow and wicked. "What do you want to think about?" "How soon we can politely leave our own reception." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Eager, Mrs. Carver?" She loved the sound of that. Mrs. Carver. A name she'd chosen, a life she'd built, a man she'd claimed as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. "I've been waiting 6 months for you," she said, I think I've been very patient." "You have." He kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "One more hour. We say goodbye to the guests, thank them for coming, and then I'm taking you upstairs and not letting you out of bed for a week." Heat pooled low in her belly. "Promise?" "I promise." He pulled her closer, until there was no space between them at all. "I promise to love you and cherish you and make you forget that anyone else exists. I promise to make you so happy that you forget what sadness feels like. I promise." She cut him off with a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and gratitude and joy and the absolute certainty that this was right, this was real, this was forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you, too." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Now let's go say goodbye to our guests so you can keep all those promises." His laugh was pure happiness. "Yes, ma'am." They walked back into the reception together, hand in hand, and Victoria felt nothing but joy. No regret for the wedding she'd walked away from. No fear for the future stretching ahead. No doubt about the man at her side. Just 6 months ago, she'd collapsed at her own wedding, certain her life was over. She'd been right in a way. That life had ended. The life of masks and makeup and covering bruises. The life of obligation and expectation, and slowly disappearing into someone else's dreams. That Victoria had died on the cold marble floor of a church. And this Victoria, the real one, had been born in a rector's office, with a stranger's hand on her shoulder, and the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of choice spreading out before her. She'd chosen bravery. She'd chosen herself. And in the end, she'd chosen love. Not the kind that demanded she make herself smaller. Not the kind that left bruises under concealer. Not the kind that felt like a cage disguised as a wedding ring. The real kind. The kind that caught her when she fell and helped her learn to fly. The kind that saw her at her worst and chose to stay anyway. The kind that promised forever and meant it. Nathaniel squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, a private conversation in the language they'd developed over 6 months of learning each other. "I'm here," the squeeze said. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in her life, Victoria believed it. She was home. The crash came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the wedding. Victoria jerked awake to the sound of shattering glass downstairs, her heart immediately in her throat. Beside her, Nathaniel was already moving, rolling out of bed with the kind of fluid grace that spoke of muscle memory she didn't want to think about too hard. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Like hell." She was already reaching for her robe. "This is my house, too." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was another crash, closer this time, and the sound of footsteps on hardwood. Heavy, multiple sets. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He moved to the nightstand, pulled out a gun she'd known was there but had never actually seen him touch, and the reality of the situation hit her like ice water. Someone had broken into their home. "Call 911, Nathaniel said, already moving toward the door. "Lock yourself in the bathroom and don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "Nathaniel." "Victoria." He turned back, and the expression on his face was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Raw and fierce and terrified in a way that made her chest hurt. "Please. I can't focus on them if I'm worried about you." "Please." She wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him, to face whatever this was together. But she also understood what he was asking. He needed to know she was safe, so he could do whatever he needed to do. "Okay," she whispered, grabbing her phone. "But if you get hurt, I'm going to be furious." His smile was quick and strained. "Noted." Then he was gone, slipping out into the hallway with the gun held low and ready. Victoria locked herself in the bathroom, her hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to dial 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring, and Victoria forced herself to speak clearly, quietly, giving their address and explaining the situation. "Officers are on the way," the dispatcher said calmly. "Stay on the line with me. Are you in a safe location?" "Yes. The bathroom. Second floor." Victoria pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear what was happening downstairs. Voices, low and angry. Then Nathaniel's voice, cold as winter steel. "You have about 30 seconds to explain why you're in my house before I start shooting?" Victoria's blood turned to ice. A laugh. Male. Familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. "Your house? Funny. I seem to remember this used to be Whitmore property before you stole it. Marcus. Oh, God. Marcus was in her house. The property you lost in foreclosure because you couldn't make the payments." Nathaniel's voice was perfectly calm. "That property? You manipulated those loans. You destroyed my family." Marcus's voice was slurring slightly. Drunk, Victoria realized with horror. Drunk and angry, and in her house with God, knew what kind of weapons. "You took everything from me. My fiancé, my business, my reputation. You turned me into a joke. You did that to yourself when you put your hands on her." A crash. Something breaking. Victoria flinched, pressing her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. "She was mine," Marcus roared. "We had a contract, a deal, and you swooped in like some kind of white knight and poisoned her against me. I showed her security footage of you hitting her. That's not poison, that's evidence." "It was one time. She pushed me. She wouldn't listen." "It's never one time," Nathaniel interrupted, and Victoria could hear the fury leashed tight in his voice. "Margaret Chen, Sarah Goldstein, Rebecca Torres. Should I keep going? Because I have a list, Marcus." "A long list of women you hurt because you thought your money made you untouchable." The dispatcher was saying something in Victoria's ear, asking if she could still hear what was happening, but Victoria couldn't focus enough to respond. All she could hear was Marcus, drunk and dangerous and spiraling, and Nathaniel, outnumbered and trying to talk him down. "How many of you are there?" Nathaniel asked, his tone shifting. "Enough." A new voice, one Victoria didn't recognize. "You're outnumbered, Carver. Put the gun down and maybe we'll let you walk out of here." "We both know that's not true." Nathaniel sounded almost bored. "Marcus doesn't do mercy, not when he thinks he's been wronged. So here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to tell me exactly what you want. I'm going to explain why you're not getting it. And then the police are going to arrive and arrest all of you for breaking and entering." "The police?" Marcus laughed, harsh and broken. "You think I care about the police? You destroyed my life. Everything I had, everything I was supposed to be, gone because you decided to play hero for a woman who wasn't even worth it." Victoria's chest constricted. She should stay here. Should stay safe, like Nathaniel asked. But listening to Marcus reduce her to a possession, to something not worth fighting for, made rage bloom hot and bright behind her ribs. She'd spent too many years making herself small, hiding, covering bruises and pretending everything was fine. She was done hiding. Victoria unlocked the bathroom door as quietly as she could and slipped out into the hallway. The dispatcher was shouting in her ear, telling her to stay where she was, that officers were 3 minutes out, but Victoria barely heard it. She crept to the top of the stairs, staying low, and peered down into the foyer. Marcus stood in the center of the room, flanked by 2 men Victoria didn't recognize. One was holding a baseball bat, the other had a tire iron. Marcus himself was empty-handed, but swaying slightly. His expensive suit rumpled, his face flushed with alcohol and fury. Nathaniel stood across from them, his gun trained on Marcus, his body language coiled and ready. "She wasn't worth it?" Nathaniel repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "You had the privilege of being engaged to the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and you were too stupid and too cruel to see what you had. You hit her. You terrorized her. You made her feel like she had to hide who she was just to survive being near you, and you think she wasn't worth it?" She was a means to an end, Marcus spat. A way to access her father's money and satisfy my grandmother's conditions. That's all she ever was. Then you're even more pathetic than I thought. Marcus lunged forward, and everything happened at once. The man with the bat swung at Nathaniel, who ducked and fired a shot that went wide, shattering a mirror. The man with the tire iron rushed from the other side, and Nathaniel was forced to spin, to divide his attention, to fight on two fronts. Marcus ran for the stairs, ran for Victoria. She saw his eyes lock on her, saw the rage and triumph flash across his face as he realized she was there, exposed, and she didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed the heavy ceramic vase from the hallway table and hurled it down the stairs with everything she had. It caught Marcus square in the chest, knocking him backward, sending him sprawling on the marble floor with a satisfying crack. "Stay away from me!" Victoria shouted, her voice raw and fierce. "Stay away from my husband and stay away from my house." Nathaniel used the distraction to disarm the man with the tire iron, slamming him into the wall hard enough that he crumpled. The man with the bat got one more swing in, catching Nathaniel's shoulder, and Victoria watched her husband's face contort with pain before he drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus and dropped him gasping to the floor. Then it was just Marcus, struggling to his feet, his face twisted with hatred. "You ruined my life," he snarled at Victoria. "You were supposed to be nothing, a pretty face and a useful connection. And instead you turned into this person who thinks she gets to have opinions and make choices." "I was always this person," Victoria said, descending the stairs slowly, deliberately. "You just never bothered to look." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Marcus heard them too. Desperation flickered across his face. "This isn't over." "Yes," Nathaniel said, moving to stand beside Victoria, his gun still trained on Marcus even as he slipped his free hand around her waist. "It is." The police burst through the door 30 seconds later, guns drawn, shouting commands. Marcus and his two accomplices were on the ground in handcuffs within minutes, and then the house was full of officers and questions and the surreal aftermath of violence. Victoria answered questions in a daze, watching paramedics check Nathaniel's shoulder where the bat had connected. "Not broken," they said. "Probably a bad bruise, maybe a hairline fracture." He needed to go to the hospital for x-rays. "I'm fine," Nathaniel kept insisting, his eyes never leaving Victoria. "You're going to the hospital," she said firmly, "and I'm coming with you." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression made him nod instead. "Okay." They gave their statements to the police, who assured them that Marcus would be charged with breaking and entering, attempted assault, and a violation of the restraining order Victoria had filed after the wedding was called off. Between this and the pending domestic violence charges from the other women, the prosecutor was confident he'd be facing serious prison time. "He won't hurt anyone else," the officer said gently to Victoria. "Not for a long time." She nodded, feeling numb and exhausted, and strangely calm. It was 4 a.m. by the time they made it to the hospital. The x-rays showed a hairline fracture in Nathaniel's clavicle, and the doctor fitted him with a sling and prescribed pain medication and rest. "No strenuous activity for at least 4 weeks, the doctor said sternly. "That means no fighting off home invaders." Nathaniel's smile was weak, but genuine. "I'll do my best." They took an Uber home because neither of them was in any state to drive. The house was still a crime scene, yellow tape across the front door, glass glittering on the foyer floor where the mirror had shattered. "We can go to a hotel," Nathaniel said quietly. "No." Victoria shook her head. "This is our home. I'm not letting him chase us out of it." So they went in through the back door instead, carefully avoiding the areas the police had cordoned off. Victoria led Nathaniel upstairs to their bedroom, helped him out of his ruined shirt, and gently cleaned the cuts on his hands where he'd fought. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For bringing this into your life, for making you a target." His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with guilt. Marcus came here because of me, because I went after him. If I'd just left it alone, then I'd have married him, Victoria interrupted, and eventually he would have put me in the hospital or worse. You saved my life, Nathaniel. What happened tonight doesn't change that. You could have been hurt when I saw you at the top of those stairs. His voice cracked. I thought my heart was going to stop. Victoria cupped his face with both hands, making him look at her. I'm okay. We're both okay. And Marcus is going to prison where he belongs. You threw a vase at him. I did. She couldn't help the small smile. It felt good. His laugh was surprised and a little broken. You're incredible. Do you know that? You're the strongest, bravest, most amazing person I've ever met. I learned from the best. She kissed him softly, carefully, mindful of his injuries. You showed me what it looks like to stand up for yourself, to refuse to let bad people win just because they think they're entitled to. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the pre-dawn darkness, both of them shaking slightly with adrenaline, crash, and relief. I want to install better security, Nathaniel said finally. Cameras, reinforced doors, maybe a panic room. Okay. And I want you to learn how to shoot. Not because I think you'll need to, but because I want you to have every possible tool to protect yourself. Okay. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. On one condition. What's that? You stop blaming yourself for things that aren't your fault. Marcus made his choices. You didn't make him break into our house. You didn't make him hit me 6 months ago. You didn't create the kind of person who thinks violence is an acceptable response to not getting his way. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll try. That's all I ask. She helped him into bed, then climbed in beside him, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. Now get some rest. Doctor's orders. Yes, ma'am. But neither of them could sleep. They lay there as dawn broke outside their window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and talked about everything and nothing. About the security upgrades they'd make, about the statement they'd give to the press, about whether they should take a vacation, get away for a while until the media circus died down. Where would you want to go? Nathaniel asked, his good arm wrapped around her, holding her close. I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere nobody knows us. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. Maybe Italy, or Greece. Somewhere with sunshine and good food, and absolutely no drama. That sounds perfect. Victoria's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She grabbed it, saw her mother's name on the screen, and answered with a sigh. Hi, Mom. Victoria, I just saw the news. Are you all right? Is Nathaniel hurt? Her mother's voice was frantic, all her usual composure shattered. We're fine, Mom. Nathaniel has a fractured collarbone, but it'll heal. We're okay. Marcus broke into your house, with accomplices. Victoria, this is insane. I know. I'm so sorry, her mother's voice cracked. I'm so sorry I ever pushed you toward that wedding. If I'd known what he was capable of. You couldn't have known, Victoria said gently, surprised by the compassion in her own voice. He hid it well. And I forgive you, Mom. I forgave you months ago. Her mother was crying now, quiet sobs that made Victoria's chest ache. I love you so much, sweetheart. I just wanted you to be safe and taken care of, and I nearly pushed you into a nightmare. But you didn't. I got out. I'm happy now, Mom. Really, truly happy. Because of Nathaniel. Because of me, Victoria corrected. Because I chose to value myself more than everyone's expectations. Nathaniel helped, but the choice was mine. They talked for a few more minutes, her mother insisting on coming over later to check on them, to bring food, to mother her. Victoria agreed because she could hear the need in her mother's voice, the desire to do something, anything, to make this better. When she hung up, Nathaniel was watching her with soft eyes. That was very mature of you, he said. I'm learning that holding grudges takes too much energy. She settled back against him, and life's too short to waste it on anger when you could be happy instead. He kissed the top of her head. When did you get so wise? About 3 months ago, when this overprotective, slightly controlling, completely wonderful man swept into my life and refused to let me settle for less than I deserved. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. Slightly controlling? Okay, very controlling, but in a hot way. In a hot way, he repeated, amused. Definitely. She tilted her head back to look at him. You know what I realized tonight? What's that? I'm not scared anymore. When Marcus broke in, when I saw him at the bottom of those stairs, I wasn't scared. I was angry. And that's different. She sat up slightly, looking down at him. For so long, I was terrified of him. Of what he'd do if I left. Of what he'd take from my family. Of who I'd be without all the expectations and obligations that had defined me my whole life. And now? Now I know exactly who I am. I'm the woman who walked away from a wedding everyone said I needed. The woman who built a business from nothing. The woman who married the man she loves and threw a vase at her ex-fiancé when he tried to hurt them. She smiled. I'm not a victim, Nathaniel. I never was. I was just someone who hadn't found her courage yet. His eyes were shining. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Good. She leaned down and kissed him, slow and deep and full of promise. Because I love you just as much, and we're going to have a long, happy, probably occasionally dramatic life together. Occasionally dramatic, he murmured against her lips. That's one way to put it. They fell asleep finally as the sun climbed higher in the sky, tangled together in their bed in their home, safe and whole and together. Marcus Whitmore went to prison 6 months later. 3 years on the assault charges, 2 years for the breaking and entering, all to be served consecutively. The judge was unmoved by his lawyer's arguments about his previously clean record and bright future. You had every advantage in life, the judge said at sentencing. Wealth, education, opportunity. And you chose to use those advantages to hurt women weaker than yourself. The court has no sympathy for you, Mr. Whitmore. Victoria watched from the gallery, Nathaniel's hand tight in hers, and felt nothing but relief when the bailiff led Marcus away in handcuffs. Her photography business flourished. She opened a gallery in the arts district, showcasing not just her own work, but that of other emerging artists. She taught classes on weekends, helped young women find their voice through the lens, and slowly built something that was entirely hers. Nathaniel continued doing what he did best, acquiring failing businesses and turning them around, using his considerable resources to help people who'd been taken advantage of by men like Marcus. They became a formidable team, her eye for human stories, and his head for strategy, combining into something powerful and good. And on quiet nights, when it was just the two of them in their home with its upgraded security and reinforced doors and the memories of violence fading with time, Victoria would look at her husband and marvel at how far she'd come. From the woman who collapsed at her own wedding, makeup covering bruises and fear covering everything else, to the woman who stood tall and built the life she wanted and loved without reservation or fear. She'd been saved that day in the rector's office, it was true. But more than that, she'd been seen. And in being seen, she'd finally learned to see herself. Not as someone who needed to be protected or managed or fixed, but as someone whole and worthy and strong enough to weather any storm. Especially when she had Nathaniel beside her, his hand in hers, both of them choosing each other every single day. That was the real happily ever after. Not the absence of conflict or pain or challenge, but the presence of someone who saw all of you and loved you anyway. Who caught you when you fell and helped you learn to fly. Victoria had fallen once, a long time ago, but she'd been flying ever since.